was expected that seasoned former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi and rising GOP Communications Director Karoline Leavitt would square off in another heated but manageable political battle. Two conservative voices were on opposite sides of a heated internal party argument about generational goals and strategic leadership. The studio was buzzing with activity. Journalists and ordinary people with a political bent were among the audience members who had turned in expecting a contentious discussion. Even the most pessimistic observers were shocked by what happened as Bondi, who is frequently known for her calm and analytical demeanor, responded with lightning accuracy to a series of very personal attacks from Leavitt that many later judged to be unsuitable. Leavitt dismissed Bondi's calls for party unity as outdated political theater and accused her of clinging to her former glories rather than adapting to the new conservative base. This was the exchange's initial point of contention. Bondi responded with a smile and statistics that highlighted her work throughout the Trump administration, her legal victories, and her influence in the media. But Leavitt took a different tack and shifted his criticism from politics to personal insults. She cited Bondi's advanced age, questioned her relevance in the social media era, and claimed that her TV appearances were more about preserving her ego than about furthering her goals. Even the MC was a little taken aback by the hushed gasps from the audience. Bondi took a while to reply. Her smile faded after a short while of sitting, and instead of an emotional outpouring, there was a Bondi began with the truth rather than a rebuttal, delivering a very poised statement that went beyond any criticism Leavitt tried to make. "You know what's funny, Karoline," she said, leaning forward a little. "You talk a lot about relevance, but without wisdom, relevance is just noise. Through my decades of service, I've also learned that substance survives while flash fades something. You can only learn after years of failing and then succeeding again." She went on to criticize the tendency of performative conservatism, which favors viral moments above real influence, saying there was complete silence in the room. "This isn't Instagram," this individual said. "This is the nation's future that we are discussing. It is not possible to Twitter your way into policy, but it is possible to tweet your way into a headline." Leavitt attempted to interject, but Bondi waved him aside, saying, "You had your moment. Now you can listen." She went on to offer a comprehensive examination of Leavitt's contradictions, including everything from campaign rhetoric to earlier statements in which she praised those she now criticizes. The quote from Bondi that goes, "It's harder to lead when you've actually stood in the fire. Attacking when you haven't produced anything is easy." Her voice never rose, but her words resounded like thunder. She closed with a rhetorical dagger. "You will see that the opposition will find it easy to ignore you if you ruin ties inside your own party. Till then, take pleasure in the likes and retweets." The audience erupted in a stunned applause, not because of political yelling, but more because they realized when someone had shown the moral superiority without resorting to violence. Leavitt looked worried, shifting in her seat as the moderator stammered through a changeover that no one really heard, clearly unsure of how to relevance the segment. The little footage was uploaded on the internet in a matter of hours. By morning, Bondi's name was being used in a variety of settings by people from all political backgrounds. Indeed, some progressives even acknowledge her strength, discernment, and restraint. The debate's political implications and criticism on the state of modern speech were examined by cable news experts, had the younger generation's emphasis on influence and appearance above basic governance caused the formerly orderly and well-coordinated governance to devolve into intramural strife, whether intentional or not. Bondi had set off a much broader conversation that exposed the differences between the influencer class and the institutional veterans. What would have been a dull TV fight has become a generational indictment wrapped in calm confidence. Leavitt's team responded by defending her comments, saying they were a necessary break from an outdated narrative and accusing Bondi of stifling conservative ideas, but damage had already been done. Prominent conservatives supported Bondi, including members of the media and former RNC members. One tweet said, "That's what leadership looks like, reminding Leavitt that respect for elders was a strength, not a weakness." Even those who often express political disapproval of Bondi praised her composure and the deft way she transformed a personal insult into a teaching opportunity. Nothing had the same long-term effect as Bondi's ultimate decision, despite Leavitt's friends in the media trying to deflect attention with tales of daring against the establishment and generational change. Bondi also did not capitalize on the chance to finish a winning lap. She wrote, "Substance over spectacle. Always the elegance of the response made it all the more potent." On a straightforward quote card in an online post in the weeks that followed, Bondi was inundated with invitations to speak on political resilience and strength speech at legal panels and collegiate forums. One organizer said, "We need more examples of how to argue with elegance and vigor," which is why they chose her. Leavitt's reputation took a hit in the interim. Conservative financiers reportedly stopped supporting a number of the initiatives she was working on. Internal party strategists began reevaluating how much lead should be given to media-trained individuals without policy knowledge. Despite Leavitt's ongoing social media involvement, audiences drawn to conflict now desired authenticity and experience. Some of her admirers even went so far as to add, "Pam Bondi schooled you and you needed it." Even though these shifts in public opinion are rare, they have a profound effect when they do happen. The struggle had crystallized something greater than each lady. It had created a line between earned voice and pointless noise, between show and legacy. In political circles, the affair became a case study. Campaign managers used brief clips of Bondi's response to show staff members how to handle hostility without losing your cool during staff training. Commentators raised the issue in works on generational disputes within movements, pointing out that ambition might transform philosophy into a weapon if it isn't connected to real service. More than anything, it forced an uncomfortable but necessary conversation about the conservative movement's leadership and communication strategy. It was shown that being youthful and tech-savvy did not automatically translate into power. More than just protecting her image, Bondi's actions that day reminded an entire political era of what genuine maturity and leadership look like. Without shouting or offending anyone, she was able to quiet a storm by standing just in her record of her principles and experience. Similar to earlier media frenzy, the subject soon dropped from the news, but its impact remained. I don't need to share space with people who confuse ambition for depth. Bondi smiled months later when asked if she would work with Leavitt again in a podcast interview. It wasn't petty, it was final, and just like her studio moment, it was sharp without being cruel, true without being theatrical. Political experts now characterize Leavitt's recent appearances, in which she has tempered her tone despite being active and vocal, as the Bondi line a threshold of grace under pressure that rookie journalists are quietly told not to break. It's unclear if this is due to introspection or public outcry, but the fire she formerly aimed at her own side now glows more warily. According to some, that is growth. Some say it's fear, but whatever the reason, meeting Bondi was an unexpected life-changing event that humbled and refocused her. Events in the broader narrative of political speech seldom make it past their news cycle, but this one did, not only because of the disputes the two women had on camera, but because of what they stood for. The new versus the old, the loud versus the learned, the mission against the time. Pam Bondi did more than just respond. She provided clarification. She didn't win a debate, but she did disclose a mindset. By doing this, she set an example for how clarity and decency always win out over spectacle. The rest of the nation was left believing that this was the rarest political triumph, notwithstanding the studio's shock that night. What began as a live broadcast fireworks event rapidly evolved into a cultural flashpoint that was considerably more significant than either party could have predicted as the effects of the Bondi-Leavitt conflict rippled through the media and political milieu. Newsroom editorial panels and podcasts examine the incident for its deeper meaning about respect, generational conflict, and how political ambition sometimes overrides institutional experience. In addition to the fact that it was a memorable encounter, instead of feeling victorious, Bondi returned to public discourse with a clear authority that had not only been validated, but also weaponized by timing and clarity. Her prominence gradually rose once more, not because she sought out cameras, but rather because her own self-control became the norm. However, even though Leavitt was still active in online communities, his perception was shifting. Not as a disruptor challenging the current order, but as someone whose hopes of going viral had fallen flat under the weight of stuff she couldn't match. The repercussions were felt, even by her most vocal supporters, in private donor meetings and think tank discussions. Strategists who had earlier applauded young aggression began quietly reevaluating the formula, understanding that although volatility might be entertaining, its effects rarely last. The media's tone changed as well. Formerly rejoicing in dramatic moments, the same panel shows began to move toward more measured talks, often inviting senior officials from both parties to address challenging topics. Outside of the gladiatorial arena, the term Bondi came to stand for a kind of ethical change. Analysts and colleagues would contend that when younger politicians began making personal attacks, or tales that were overly centered on optics, they needed a Bondi moment. In addition to teaching law and politics, universities encouraged her to teach leadership, especially leadership under stress. Her one exchange on a studio platform served as a reminder to the public that political engagement didn't have to be violent to make an impression. In fact, it appears that the contrary is becoming true. Audiences were exhausted by noise and longed for clarity and strength without posing. Bondi embodied that with style and distinction. She gave a direct response when asked if she planned to run for office again. In a private interview, sometimes influence is more effective when it doesn't come with a campaign. Karoline Leavitt, meantime, began to make a little shift of her own. She stopped using aggressive language in her speeches, switched from showy sound bites to policy-focused talking points, and even released a lengthy podcast episode where she admitted that she was still learning how to lead under pressure. The crowd understood the connotation even though she never mentioned Bondi by name. That experience acted as a wake-up call for her, highlighting the limits of charm in the absence of grace. The spotlight was less harsh and she was now more cautious, yet she still avoided it entirely. Furthermore, although some passionate supporters applauded the shift in silence, others saw it as a betrayal of her once fiery personality. It was a woman who didn't yell, didn't pose, and didn't apologize for refusing to be denigrated, who signified a shift in the political scene, which has long relied on confrontation for ratings. After all, shame may occasionally lead to growth, particularly when pride encounters a more formidable foe who is equipped with reason. Rather than anger, the crucial event was reenacted over and over again because it was special, not because it was dramatic. Most talks end in meaningless chatter, but this one had consequences. And in political television theaters, consequences are rare, thus the moment was sacred. Bondi began to pick her media appearances more carefully after that. Her renown was heightened by her rarity. When she did spoke, it was with the solemnity of someone who had established herself both once and in the subsequent quiet. The Bondi Leavitt moment continued to be a ray of hope for many as political cycles continued, serving as a reminder that truth doesn't always need a hashtag or a lot of volume. It only needs experience, bravery, and the ability to be calm in the face of mayhem. The studio became silent, and it was the most significant lesson of the day.